good to see you, man.
Likewise.
I'm excited to finally get to talk to you.
Yeah, remind me, have we met? And I'm asking because I'm terrible about this and I'm very insecure about it. But have we met before?
We have not, no.
Okay, all right.
I know you're buddies with Cameron Leach.
Yeah.
Um, him and I do kind of like a sub series underneath my podcast.
Oh, nice. Okay,
So we've gotten to know each other pretty well.
great.
Yeah, he's a cool guy, and we actually talk a lot outside of the podcast now. But yeah, he actually told me probably like 6 months ago now. He's like, you should try to get Josh on, and I was like, okay, yeah. So the I've like been up and down with doing episodes. Like I've been busy, and then I do a bunch of them in bulk, and then I was having trouble getting guests, and it was like, oh man. So now I'm getting back into it with this mental health series. So I think it's, for one thing, it's really cool to have you on. And I think you commented on my original post about it, which was cool. So yeah, I'm excited.
Nice.
To finally get to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, it's a topic that I think doesn't get talked about enough, and it's also one I personally have. I mean, I think just as a disclaimer before we get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, anything I say is strictly my experience, and anybody who takes from it anything other than that, stuff I say may or may not work for other folks. It's just been my experience. So I just wanted to say that up front, that I don't expect anybody to have had the exact same experience I've had. So
yeah, and I think the episodes I've had before this one have that disclaimer kind of like within the conversation of like, everybody's been really good about saying like, look, this is what my experience has been. I've also had people on that don't deal with anxiety or depression, but they deal with ADD. Drew Tucker was very open about that. So there's a lot. The spectrum is so wide, which is something that is not talked about a lot. I think musicians cover a lot of the spectrum, particularly because I think we're pretty emotionally tapped in. I think constantly. I think we're always trying to emit what we're feeling through our playing and through our musicianship. So, at least that's my opinion. And so when you say that this isn't talked about enough, I completely agree, because I've had several people reach out, and I think this is something that people want to hear, conversations of people's experiences, not exactly looking for help, but at least knowing that they're not alone in these situations. It's fighting the good fight. It's making sure people feel like somebody's there with them. I know for a fact that in my experience, I have felt like I was the only one dealing with it.
yeah, I mean, that's the fundamental rub with depression or anxiety. At least in my case, depression and anxiety is that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why it's called depression, because you feel like you're alone,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and it doesn't, you're not able to depression is not an empathetic ailment, meaning it disables your empathy. Like, you're not able to imagine yourself in somebody else's shoes feeling the same way you do, because what you're experiencing is so terrible.
right.
You're just like, well, nobody could possibly experience this pain that I'm feeling. And that's self-defeating, and it sucks, but that's the reality of depression.
Right. And feeling like there is the feeling of that it's a weakness. I think there's a little bit of machismo behind what goes on with these kinds of feelings, like if like I should just suck it up. There's previous generations who would say that, when in fact they probably have dealt with the same thing, and they just call it whatever they want to call it, and they don't deal with it. And I think in the modern age and how things are now in society, and I'm actually just trying to contribute to what I'm seeing, which is there is seems to be more of a push of awareness of mental health, and I don't know. I still don't think there's enough resources personally, just in my research. But if I can contribute in some way, which we talked about a little bit last night, then I feel like it's at least helping in some way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think it's laudable that you're taking the initiative to do that. I would say in my own podcast, I talk about this stuff, but it's never I've never really hyper focused a podcast specifically on these issues. So, in that spirit, I my instincts are always to guide a podcast because I'm a podcaster, but I want to sort of
Same.
take the passenger seat here. And since this is you initiated the chat for your podcast, and we are going to co-release it, but I'll sort of let you guide the conversation from where you want to start, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I think someone of your who has your experience within this realm of percussion and this kind of like niche community, to be a part of something that has set a lot of bars, and you've established a name for yourself, and you've been a part of people's careers that have also established a name for themselves. And so, like, it's very easy for someone to think like this guy has it all figured out, right? It's very easy to assume that every time you're up on that stage, you're living the dream, or you're in that notable recording, you're in that notable YouTube video, and like this guy literally is doing what we all want to do. And so I think it's one of those things where a lot of the curtain is more of the curtains being pulled back on notable people in all fronts, sports, entertainment overall. What have your struggles been? I mean, and when did they kind of start for you? I think I can kind of pinpoint when mine started being extreme, but when did it kind of start for you, the mental struggles?
Well, I would say, genetically speaking, my family has we have a lot of history of mental illness, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety. Those sorts of things run rampant in my family history anyway, and they've manifested themselves in different family members at different rates and in different ways. For me, I feel like depression came before anxiety, and I didn't know what depression or anxiety was when they came, and now I'm becoming more aware of how they fed into each other. And for me, the depression was the first thing that came on, and it was in grad school when I was at Yale.
Mm.
I think for a lot of reasons, it was the natural, like, I'm a kid from the middle of nowhere in Ohio, and, grew up in cornfields, and then I went to the University of Akron, and it was like, yeah, it's a bigger city, but I went to Ohio State first and then to Akron. But it was like, okay, still in Ohio, still like 20 or 30 minutes from my family. Excuse me, I'm having a
Be
stroke.
parents.
I'm having a stroke over here. But then I went to Yale, and it was like, all of a sudden now I'm in a different culture. Like, I'm now on the East Coast, and this is when, like, my first experience with, I grew up in a conservative household, listened to Rush Limbaugh all day. Like that was in my house growing up, and I would say not the type of conservative that is happening now, but because there was no hate in my house other than what was on the radio. But like, my parents never, it was not like that translated to the way my mom and dad taught me to speak to people.
Right.
But when I got to Yale, it was like, oh, what's a flyover state? Like, that's weird. I've never heard that term before. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's
Yeah.
a derogatory term that you're talking about the place I grew up. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And then like, but then I got into like really intense work at grad school, and it was just like, I'm practicing 8 hours a day, and I'm in rehearsals and all this stuff. And then summer hits, and I had this weird like postpartum, like all of a sudden it was over. Like, that first year was done, and there was nothing. Bob went away for the summer. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
you mean that's it? Like, what am I doing now? And so I just laid in bed for a month watching
Yeah.
West Wing, and I just I couldn't bring myself to practice. There was like, I wasn't going to pick up a new marimba piece. Like, I just, like, that was not even, I felt like I needed to, but I just was like, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And then it happened again the next summer, and I was playing gigs and stuff. So like, I would get out of bed to go play a gig, and I would do my job, but I would come back and go right to bed,
Yeah.
do it the next day. And then school would start. right back at it, practicing 12 hours a day. Like it was all, then the depression was done. I just didn't know what
Yeah.
it was. And I get out of grad school, and there's all the sort of anxieties of, what you're going to do for a living. Are you going to get a teaching job? Are you going to,
Oh man.
all those
I
things.
I just yeah, that is in itself. I could go on and on about that. That
Well,
you're standing at that crossroads and you're just like, what the, you know?
yeah, and I was fortunate enough that just the way the cookie crumbled when I was coming out of grad school, Doug Perkins left So around that time. I started subbing with So and got the job with So.
Hmm.
And I don't want to discount, like, yes, I was fortunate, I was lucky, I was privileged, all those things, but I also busted my fucking ass to like
Of course,
get that gig.
absolutely.
But then once I got into to me, the depression sort of like kind of eased once I got a job, because then the job was like year round. Like I had something, like I was in the market doing things. I wasn't making any money at all, but I had a job. And so the depression went away, but then my dad passed away. He died of Lou Gehrig's disease when I was on
Mm.
the road, and that sort of like we flew to Helena, Montana. My dad had been sick for 3 years, and flew to Helena, Montana. I was getting off of an airplane connecting from Billings to Helena, and I got off the airplane and I was boarding the connecting flight. And my mom calls me and she's like, "Your dad's gonna pass in the next hour."
Oh my
And
gosh.
he had he has ALS, so he couldn't speak.
Mm.
And so I'm just like, "I love you, Dad. I'm so sorry." And then there's like nothing
As you're boarding a flight,
as I'm boarding a flight, to play a
are
gig.
do people hear you like say goodbye to your father? Like, is
I don't
that
know. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I was on
yeah,
an old like Nokia cell phone.
yeah,
It's like, and there was no FaceTime. It's not like I could.
yeah.
I just said goodbye, and then I got on the plane, get to Helena, Montana, fall asleep, and my mom calls me at 2 in the morning. He's like, "Your dad's passed." And so I went down into the lobby of the hotel and just started working on budgets for So, because
Wow.
I didn't know there was no. It was the only thing in my control at that moment.
Yeah.
You know. So I did that until the lobby call the next morning. People come down. Presenter walks in the lobby, the hotel lobby, and is like, "Good news! A donor. We've auctioned you off to a donor, and you're gonna play a house party. Let's go!" And so like the day my father dies, I get auctioned off to play a house party for a donor in Helena, Montana. Now, there's two things happening here. There's a job that needs to be
Mm.
done, and the presenter is within his rights to get us work. It's like,
Right.
but then I'm currently dealing with this other family thing. I'm in a group with 4 people. You take one person out, the group doesn't work anymore. And so it was more complicated for me at that time to be like, guys, I got to go home. My dad passed, because then it meant we were going to lose all this money, and I'm the guy running budgets. And so like, I don't know if I made the right decision, but I stayed and played the gig.
Mm.
But then all of a sudden I would have like a heart palpitation, or like my finger would twitch and I would feel like I have ALS. And so like, like I'm going to die the way my
Mm.
dad did. And so that anxiety would start to bubble up to the point where I was on the road a couple years later in, where was it? Oh, Minnesota and Minneapolis. We were playing a show called Where We Live. We were out at a restaurant, started having heart palpitations, and I just looked around, and the only thing I could do was get up and leave the room and just walk around town.
Yep.
And I
I've
called
done that so many times.
I called my doctor the next morning, and I was like, I think I'm having a heart attack. She's like, "You're not having a heart attack. You're having a panic attack, and those are two wholly different things. You're going to be fine."
Mm.
And she sort of talked me off the ledge. I was like, "Oh, oh,
I'm still having
okay."
an attack, but at least it's not the heart one.
It's
So
not the thing I thought it was. And
yeah,
so then I went back and got on Lexapro,
yeah.
and started doing some talk therapy, and I haven't been as diligent with the talk therapy as I should be, but I'm on Lexapro 20 milligrams a day, and it has helped me. And and it doesn't help everybody, and for me what it did was sort of like, I think some people describe being on antidepressants or SSRIs as being sort of like you're numb to the world. It's like I don't personally feel that way at all. I feel
Mm.
like what it does is it allows me to see potential trauma triggers objectively and clearly.
Yeah.
Clearer, I should say. I still have things that are like, "Ugh,"
Yeah, exactly.
but at least I can identify them now, and I know what's happening now. Whereas 10 years ago, I didn't, and I just thought this low grade simmer I was having all the time was just natural. There'd be times I was on. There was a time I played pieces of wood, music for pieces of wood, and in the middle of the performance, I had such a bad series of heart palpitations that I didn't pass out, but I noticeably looked up and everything was frozen for like what felt to me for like 30 seconds.
Mm.
Like nothing was moving. I looked down, I could see my hand, but the stick was like frozen. It's like that thing, like when the light is just right, it looks like the stick stays still,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, what the fuck? And then it just snapped out of it. And after I got off stage and I was like, I'm really sorry, guys. And they were like, what? Like they had no idea. And I was like, oh my God, like what what if that happens and I can't
Yeah.
control it? Now my job's on the line, And so anyway, that for me that was it was less I had less anxiety about the sort of existential crisis of coming out of grad school and getting a job, or like I mean I had the like I don't want to be a college teacher because I don't want to get my doctorate. Like I
Yeah.
hate orchestra auditions because I'm bad at them and I've taken one and I failed it miserably. Like I had those anxieties and those fears, but for me the ones that were not anyone else's fault and that were strictly mine, like anxiety, things I couldn't blame on other people,
Yeah, it's all
those
on you. Yeah.
those kind of manifested towards the end of my grad work and then early on in my time with so.
Yeah. What was there any part of the grad school experience, like the process of itself during the year, that may have contributed to that? I mean, Yale obviously has this reputation of being a staple in, you know, a lot of aspects. I mean, it has such a history of being, um, having one of the most extensive and notable alumni. I mean, fan size is unreal and it has always been. And so, was there any part of like maybe because you mentioned a little bit of an imposter syndrome maybe
Mm-hmm,
when you got
mm-hmm,
there,
mm-hmm.
but was there ever a process of like when you were there, like I belong here, or was there um, a lot of stress involved with that experience? I'm just asking more so for me, it's like just curiosity because UNLV is has a lot of notable alumni
Mm-hmm.
and Dean has been there for 30 years, and you just want to make sure that you're not getting there and being a bump in the road kind of thing. Was there anything about that experience that may have contributed?
I don't. That's a good question. And I again, like I may not have seen it the way that people are seeing it now, but I was the type of student that I knew what I was getting away with,
Mm,
and as a player in my undergrad, like my teacher, Larry Snyder, Dr. Larry Snyder at the University of Akron was my undergrad teacher. I would absolutely take a bullet for that man.
mm.
And anybody who says nay about him, I'll punch you in the face. But his skill set was really tailored towards sort of opportunities and giving you opportunities to play gigs and have exposure to a million things.
Yeah.
Bob was somebody who would just look you in the face and be like, "You have a terrible snare drum roll."
Mm.
Right? And I would be like, "Yeah, but it's getting better." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, no, it's sure, but it's bad." Right? And I'd be like, "Yeah."
Yes, sir.
Or well, not even a like, "Yes, sir," but just a like he in terms of what he was hearing, he wasn't afraid to call balls and strikes. Like
Right. Yeah.
not like you missed that note, but it's like I've heard you miss that note consistently. We need to talk about that. Or I think you think you're producing this sound, but here's what's coming out. Let me show you. And guys, you can't play this piece and you need another 6 hours of rehearsal. Those sorts of things that was just like, God damn, it's like going to a good trainer
Yeah.
who is
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, you got to do 50 push-ups a day. What do you want me to say? If you want chest muscles, you got to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I never, truthfully, there were really hard lessons where Bob said things to me that no teacher had ever said. like in a timpani lesson when I'm playing Beethoven 1, you know.
Mm.
I think I've got it down, and Bob stops and he's like, we're at a fork in the road. We're going to take two different paths here. One is you want to play in an orchestra, and the other is you don't care if you play in an orchestra. He's like, because right now, you definitely can't play in an orchestra. You will not get a job playing in an orchestra. That's what he meant. I mean, I can play in an orchestra, but like, you'll never get a job playing in an orchestra
Right.
the
Yeah.
way you sound now. So, do you care about that, or do you want to play in an orchestra? Because if you don't care, and you'd rather play luau gigs over a timpani gig on steel drums, let's say that out loud. And like that moment of accountability was really heavy for me because I felt like a sliding door moment. Like I have to decide now, and no one had ever made
Yeah.
me decide. And I was like, and it wasn't even a decision never to play in an orchestra because I played with the LA Phil several times with you know.
Mm.
But I did say, Bob, you're right. I think I don't want to take orchestra auditions. And he was like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to teach someone how to play Beethoven 1 well enough so that if they're in a high school orchestra or a college orchestra, they'll be okay.
That's awesome.
And I was like, shit, that was really heavy.
Yeah.
And so, like, that sort of anxiety, I was just the type of student to sort of tell me tell me everything, good, bad,
Mm.
ugly. So Yale was something I would never trade for the world. I mean, that time was crucial to forming. It was like that's when the coal gets crushed into a diamond. Like that's
Right.
where I
Yeah.
learned what I could and couldn't do. And
I I think I'm going luau gig still over over orchestra personally. But I I I had a similar experience with mine, but there was also this what kind of contributed to my anxiety. It was weird. I had a ton of performance anxiety in my undergrad
hmm
because I thought I wasn't very good, and so when you start to worry about what all could go wrong because you know what you think you're incapable of, that will all of a sudden contribute to whatever. But as my grad school experience went on, the performance anxiety went away, but the general anxiety increased. You know, was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be this person to contribute to the percussion world in some way,
hmm
to make a name for myself and make sure that I'm, you know, uh, making this all worth it, for lack of a better way to say it. So, um, and while I don't feel like I've done much yet, there just because of the pandemic and everything, but there there was like this. It was weird. It was like the scale of anxiety tipped, where performance anxiety was at an all time low,
hmm
and like I'm sitting there having panic attack in Tom Leslie's wind orchestra rehearsal, and I have to leave and take a walk around campus, similar to what you were saying about having to leave and take a walk around town.
hmm
It's very strange, man. And what what I'm trying to do now is learn how my brain works, how what truly are the triggers that,
hmm
because apparently I have different levels of anxiety. At least I think I do. Um, and just thinking about all these past experiences and just thinking like, oh, okay, well, everybody must go through this, where it's in reality, a lot of people do, but it varies so much that it really is like kind of like a David versus Goliath kind of thing. You kind of have to just you keep getting knocked down, and then you have to get back up, and you're like, all right, what just happened? So
Well, I mean, this is for me now. I'm 41. I'm going to be 42 on July 11th, so that's terrifying.
happy early
But
birthday.
thanks. Um, but it's for me now where as a teacher, I'm trying to figure out what the ethics are around because when you sit like you're sitting in a wind band rehearsal having a panic attack and you got to get up and leave. From the band director's perspective, one of his students just got up and left,
Mm.
and he or she or they have no idea why, Happens all the time in my classes. A student on Zoom, a student's Zoom screen goes away, or they just leave the room in a rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're part of the culture now, and the way that we as students and teachers are interacting is there's this sort of underlying, you can't ask why you're leaving the room, because if it's for mental health, then that's an unquestionable thing. I'm saying all that as like, it's been a little bit of my experience as a teacher, but also I understand why that approach exists as somebody who
Mm.
has dealt with anxiety in very closed circumstances and wanted to leave the room.
All right.
That said, the older I get, the more I look back on the times when I had crushing anxiety about whether it be a performance or particular interaction with somebody or whatever. 99% of the time, the thing I learned by pushing through it and sitting and trusting that I'm not actually in any real danger right now has the victory party afterwards is way better
Oh yeah.
than the party I feel when I leave the room temporarily to alleviate my stress. Why? Like, reason being, when I say that, if I was your band director, I would be like, Josh, just stay here, buddy. I know it sucks, bro.
Mm.
Just crash the cymbals. Look at me and you. Don't look at anybody else. I got you. Like, just stay here. That's how you learn about what to genuinely fear and be afraid of, and you get better at it. It's just like your snare drum roll. Like, you got to learn, you get better at being yourself the more you force yourself to be yourself.
Mm.
And for me, when I get anxious and I have to leave the room, I'm running from something because I don't want to deal with it in the moment, or I can't. And that's just to say, like, sometimes you leave the room,
Mm.
but but I picture leaving the room the same way you feel when you're running and you're out of breath and you're like, yeah, I'll stop now.
Yeah.
It's like, you can keep running. I know I can keep running, but I don't. You know.
Yeah.
And so I think in these moments when you're having anxiety, like, think of it as like, yeah, your brain is out of breath, but it's out of breath for the wrong reasons. So just
Mm.
reteach your brain how to, like, I take hot yoga sometimes, and it's fascinating when your heart starts to race, you can act, and you actually hijack your breathing and think of it as a separate thing from your heart rate. Then your heart rate sort of comes back down with your breathing always. You know, like, if you're just freaking out and you just start, and you really just focus on that, things realign. And then I forget about it and things get back out of alignment. But it's
Yeah.
like, but I got to practice that. That's a skill. It works, you know? And
Yeah.
it's so, like,
Yeah.
that's something the older I get, the more I'm trying to push myself to do.
Yeah. Well, that must be why I suck at running then, because
Oh,
like,
I suck at running too, and I'm, but that's
yeah.
the things. This is what I hesitate sometimes to give this advice to students who are dealing with this stuff, because I don't want somebody to feel like they're alone and that they just have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But at the end of the day, it's on you.
Yeah. I
You
completely agree.
you have to that's it is truly a, like, personal responsibility thing. You can have friends checking in with you all the time, being like, hey, just love you, I hope you're doing great. But if you don't actually take the step to do that for yourself, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
And I say that for any young students now who are listening to me and they don't believe me. I'm only a 42-year-old version of you. Like,
Yeah.
I was 19 and I went through the same. I'm still dealing with it. I'm 42. So, you know.
Yeah. I and it's funny because, you know, uh, whenever I think of like being that person that, people, need to check on and everything like that, I always feel like such a burden. I'm sure a lot. I'm sure everybody does, And when it comes to like this personal battle, fighting the good fight within yourself, um, there. What do you think about it being an artist kind of musician thing that a lot of people deal with this? Do you think it is like I mentioned before, that we are in touch with ourselves and we are trying to convey emotions constantly through another medium? Do you agree with that? Because That's the only thing I can really think of. I've also met artists and musicians who don't deal with this, or at least they have hide it extremely well, um, or they let it completely out through their art form, which I I have felt before, but it has never been a 100% kind of like, let's leave it all out through this. Do you agree with that, or am I just kind of generalizing? I'm not sure.
I yes to all of it.
Mm,
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, you're generalizing, but I don't know necessarily that that's a bad thing right now. My initial reaction is that, in my experience, um, I've noticed that anxiety and depression are a human thing, and they exist in accounting, they exist in construction, they exist in grocery store baggers. Like, it's a pretty common trait amongst us as people. I think musicians, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience, I think musicians oftentimes put too much expectation on making art, how making art is going to make them feel.
mm,
Like, you think that it's going to be this thing that is going to be the salve for you all the time when you're sad or when you're happy or when you want to. I have a party on Saturday. Can't wait to make music with you all. But what happens if you have a headache?
mm.
What happens if your dad dies? Like,
Well,
you have to. Is it doing the thing then that you thought it was going to do? And so that, to me, I think I've never personally placed a lot of like emotional baggage on the result of my art making. And I don't know, other people are different. I've never been a savant, so like, if I'm gonna make an awesome piece of art, it's gonna take me 8 hours of work and practice,
oh yeah.
and that's not fun.
Mm,
And I don't derive like emotional. I don't feel like I've helped the grass grow healthier by sitting in my room and practicing scales for 8 hours a day. Like, that's me. Where this satisfaction comes from is knowing that I've done all this other work and I've helped these things move the thing forward. But where actually for me, the emotional satisfaction, where I feel like I light up as a person, is doing podcasts and
yeah.
talking to people.
Which you and
So
I are very much the same in, but
right, but does that mean I should quit music and only go into podcasts? Like, I don't feel that way. I just
no.
sometimes I feel like I take a more utilitarian view to art making, where the process is the reason to do it, not the result. Like,
Mm,
I really want to embrace the true definition of experimental music, which is you don't know what the result's going to be. You roll the dice. Some of it's going to be great. A Caroline Shaw album that we just released, super proud of it. Feel like it was a home run right over the center field fence, you know.
mm.
But other projects of ours, I'm still proud of, like a gun show that we did. Maybe, maybe some swings and misses,
Yeah, yeah.
like. And so that, not that that project didn't bring me any artistic satisfaction, but it was not. It just was not. It's not puppies and flowers all day. Like, you're building rigged stages and like plugging
Yeah.
cables in all day, and then like 14 people come to your show, and so like it's for me. I don't disagree with you, but I think I would just say that musicians will find more satisfaction in what they're doing if they are going to school to study the process rather than to study the end to get to the end result. The idea that
Mm,
you would want, when you said like, oh, you're somebody I want to do exactly what you're doing. Don't, bro. Do not.
yeah.
I highly recommend you do not. Why? Because I'm doing it and there's not enough room for two of me.
Yeah.
There's barely enough room for one of me. And so like what I think I did was to embrace the process all along, the process of making, the process of doing, the process of building relationships with people, the process of having a bad fight with a bandmate and solving it and resolving it, having horrible anxiety because of a budget discussion that went horribly wrong, that has nothing to do with art, getting through that. That is the process by which I derive satisfaction. The playing show at Carnegie Hall in December, that's going to be an hour and 27 minutes out of a year
Mm.
of work. And so the process is 98% of it. So study that. That's what we
Yeah.
should be going to school for. That's the vocation we're studying, is the vocation of learning and doing things. So that's my way of saying I agree with you, but I would put away the broad brush of artists are inherently emotional, because I don't think I'm emotional, but not because of my art. I'm emotional because of a million other factors in my life.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But I also don't want to be glib. Some people also, to be clear, art is my job.
Mm.
It's not a hobby. It's how I derive 100% of my income is through teaching art and making art with So Percussion. So there's privilege to that, but there's anxiety because I can't just do everything I love.
Yeah.
Because the market is going to call for a specific thing at a certain time. A composer might have like Caroline Shaw right now is like, a lot of people are talking about her, and I'm totally happy. I pinch myself if I get to tour with Caroline, but there might be another project that isn't in my aesthetic wheelhouse that all of a sudden people want So to do a lot. Okay,
Yeah.
great, but
Part of the gig. I
it's
mean,
part of the gig. But if I was like my brother, not my brother's a bad example. He plays music full time too. But if you want to, like, if you're an improv musician, you're like, man, I really just want to get together with my friends and do this. And I don't want it to be tapped into the market economy. Stop having anxiety about that. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Go make your art. Don't have the expectation that you're going to make 75 grand a year with health insurance and benefits.
Yeah. Yeah.
And certainly you can fight for that. But if your expectations are, I'm going to have a picket fence and a 401k and a Roth IRA playing improv music, I think it's important to just sit down and call balls and strikes on some of that stuff.
I
Because
agree.
that will influence how your anxiety manifests and whether or not it's appropriately sort of applied.
Do you think there's a point you need to get to? Like, nobody. I don't know. People don't really start out. I guess some people do. Well, Cage didn't. People can't really start out trying to do that. You're not gonna get a
Trying to do
ton
what?
experimental, like completely improv. Like, this is a very avant garde, completely improv thing that I'm doing, because like, even then, with something like what So has done over the years is establish repertoire, be very, very good at the craft, and have a standard in which we as the percussion community believe is set. um, and the population within experimental and improv, the group, maybe like art music, is very, very small. Nobody can really start out doing that. I believe, probably, because as far as like the other parts of the process go, like Steve Schick has a gig.
Mm-hmm.
He did a part of a process
Mm-hmm.
to get that gig. Well, actually, most of his process was now he can do what he wants. It's almost like you and I talked about Rogan. Rogan really is doing the jobs that he wants to do now because he had to go through doing a sitcom and doing stand up on the road and all this kind of stuff. Now he's doing the three jobs he wants to do because he's got 100 M's in the bank and he's good.
But
But like,
I would put one distinction in there, in that the podcast, which is now the thing that's netting him $100 million a year, was the one thing he was doing that no one else was doing
mm,
before anybody was paying for podcasts.
it's true.
It was a thing he did because he loved it, and the process of doing it was why he kept doing it. And he says that all the time when he does a podcast. He's like, this podcast, the 1500th episode, is very similar to the second episode in terms of it's just Joe like talking to friends.
Right. Yeah.
And it became a thing because of the process. He didn't just do 30 and, well, like, that was fun. No, he did 1500 of them. And after
Yeah.
doing anything 1500 times and committing to it in the way you feel that it's most genuine to commit to, you're going to get good at it. And like, so that's the thing. That's why I posted that thing about Rogan, is like, not everybody, but you get the sense that you're discounting the like that Joe is just this person who woke up, did Fear Factor, did this, did that, did this. It's like, no, 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 no. It was like 12,000 days of decisions
Mm.
every day, and to me, that's the thing that, like, it's easy to look. I'm not like pushing back on you here, but like I want to put some things in context. It's easy
Sure.
to look at So Percussion as like a stained glass window that's like, oh, cool, look how beautiful it is. This is here, and this is here, and this is here. And that's now we're all looking through that window, and this is the way the picture is.
It's sorry, just real quick. I imagine you like with your Indians hat on, and like you're sitting there like Jesus with your hands out. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Definitely don't compare me to
Yeah.
Jesus. But
No,
the,
you got the beard.
the that it's an illusion.
Yeah.
Like, it was thousands and thousands of days of hundreds of meetings and emails and budgets and arguments and joyous days and days of concerts and cargo van loadouts. Like, yeah, Paul Lansky's Threads is part of the canon now, or It Is Time, or Malacrotet, or whatever. But I wish with every time somebody bought a score, there you saw a running tally of how many times So Percussion loaded in two marimbas and two vibraphones.
Yeah.
You know, then I would think you'd be less impressed with how we play and more impressed by the fact that our backs haven't blown out. Like,
Herniated disc all over the
yeah,
place.
it's just like we've done 1,500 shows in the way that Rogan's done 1,500 shows. Now, in music, that just means that those muscles have developed to where we're good at playing these pieces, we're good at commissioning new pieces, but the process is not the process is what got us there. It wasn't some grand vision. It wasn't some like we're gonna in 2001 we were like we're commissioning Paul Lansky, David Lang, Steve Reich, Caroline Shaw, Sharon Nova. Like, it's not at all how it happened. Not at all.
Mm.
And I think students see a thing, or they see a PASIC thing, or they see a Vic Firth video, or they see a Pearl ad or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's a finished product. It's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
That is 3,000 days plus today.
Yeah.
And we're
And
still
it's still
making
going.
we're still making decisions today that will affect. And so, yeah, take you're welcome to see what we've done as like a canon is being developed, or blah, this path is being charted out. It's only because we just picked up some machetes and started hacking away.
Mm.
And we were the guys. Yes, we practiced all that stuff, but like we had 4 people who kept hacking. And I think a lot of people just stop hacking because they think like, oh, there's never anything back there.
Yeah.
Like, well, you're not going to find anything back there if you don't keep hacking. And
Yeah.
like, we just kept going at it. And I don't know if I've answered your question, but
I forgot what my original question was. But but what you are saying is fascinating in a sense of, especially, I just keep thinking about how much has been missed out on or hasn't been done yet within what we do, just because people stopped hacking. Because like it's not exactly the easiest thing to do this full time. I mean, Cam, I freaking draw a lot of inspiration from Cameron Leach because he is not giving up on doing this. He wanted to. He's talked about it on offstage. That's the only reason why I'm saying that. He wanted to, but he's not going to. And to me, he's embodying that, what you're talking about, just hacking away. And like, think about like what is yet to be discovered, and I hope people continue to keep hacking away. I mean, I'm going to with this and everything, and it's going to be whatever I do. That's my kind of personality type. But I just keep thinking about like maybe what's missed or like what's going to need to cycle back around, just based on it's really daunting to do this. If that makes sense.
totally. Yeah, I mean, and I would say just an addendum to what I said. This past year my anxiety's been really bad,
Same.
and I think I'm able to. It hit me the other day. I think as to why, like early on in the pandemic, like in June, it was actually around when George Floyd was murdered, and like social media was on fire, and the world was yelling at each other constantly, and I froze and just was like, I can't deal with this. And I was like, I don't care if I get COVID. I have to go to the local pub and talk to somebody.
Mm.
Not just, and talking to my wife is great, but it's like, she's working, she's got a job. I just need to get out of the house and see somebody else. And so, like, I was the guy at the bar when the CDC was like, don't go to a bar.
Yeah.
And I'm there with my mask on and just talking to somebody, a bartender, about, I don't give a fuck what, just like, aren't the leaves great? Like, because I think I've learned that I prioritize relationships over everything else. Like, my ability to have someone, my desire to have someone in my life who I might need for something, whether it be just a friendly conversation or an emergency, my desire to have that net be as wide as possible is actually what helps my anxiety. And I found the more I went out to just talk to total strangers, like go to the bar, go to Home Depot, whatever, like, it made me feel better.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to art making, one of the things that worries me and gives me anxiety about not your generation, but the generation below us right now that's sort of been forced to traffic in social media as the primary way of building relationships. I just see I see a shitload of relationships being built with like matchsticks like taped together that are flimsy and are going to catch fire at any given moment and fall down. And because social media gives you the sense that you have a relationship, but it's not really. When it comes down to it, it's not the same thing. And so I'm grateful. I think for anybody who has anxiety or feels like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with my career. I don't know what to do with, I don't want to be in an orchestra, but I don't want to teach at a college, and I want to be a band director, but everybody says that's the lame way out. But I love teaching sixth grade band.
Yeah.
Like, I heard that. I was an ed major. I heard that all the time. But sixth grade band was like one of my favorite things to student teach. And if so went away tomorrow, I would absolutely teach fifth grade clarinet and have zero qualms about it.
Yeah.
And so I think what folks should do is just keep building alliances with people, even people you disagree with. Because those are the people when you get out of school that are going to be running an art gallery that might hire you to play your gig. They're the people that are going to be running the Montessori school that needs an education, a musical educator. They're the people that are going to be running the local concert hall. They're the people who are going to decide to be accountants someday for nonprofits. And, your podcast becomes so big that you need an accountant. And all of a sudden, the person that you got in a fight with in chamber music and thought you were going to hate forever 10 years ago is now the person doing your books.
Yeah.
That approach gives me less anxiety on a daily basis. And I think will give, if a freshman in college is sort of taught to really embrace the process and to build relationships as the primary vocational goals, bro, I think not only the music world looks different, I think the world looks different. And
Yeah.
I think the music world actually has fewer people in it, but it has more people in it who actually know that they should be there and they want to be there. I think there's a lot of people in music who feel like they should be there because of a family member who was a musician or they had fun in band. But it's like, if you really derive pleasure from like mowing lawns, go mow lawns.
Yeah.
You will be a happy clam when you're 81 years old. Trust me.
Yeah.
So I hope that, I don't know if that helps at all, but like,
No, it does.
that's the thing I wish young students now would focus on. Less results oriented and more process based, and build your tool set.
Yeah. I was sitting down with some friends the other day, high school friends. None of them play drums. None of them play music. We've had this group text go on for about 10 years now. Like, it started out on iMessage group text in 2011, 2012, and now it's in GroupMe, and like, it's fun. It's like 10 or 12 of us, and we're still talking through every part of my life. They've been there. So, one disappointing factor of the other day was that, I'm sitting down, I'm the only one not on my phone. And, even, I hate to sound like the old man River here, but like, I wish that weren't the case. I used to think, and, social media has done a lot for me, and, I've gotten gigs off of it. It's a good way to market yourself. But there's a lot of people don't have that necessity, and they don't have a governor set when it comes to their interaction with it, their usage. Um, and I was really disappointed, man. I was disappointed in the fact that I'm the one looking around, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I kind of wish it was like when nobody knew what Instagram was, and we were just sitting around talking about whatever sports, anything. And I I can only imagine, especially since now, if people go the academic route like we did, um, what is a college experience going to look like? Because I know my undergrad especially was right around when social media was taking off, and so when it comes to like going through a college experience where there's going to be a lot of maybe a virtual aspect, how much is that going to change our community? How much is um, the fact that, because I feel like the relationships I've built over the years, where would I be without them? And I'm sure you feel the exact same way. So, and it breeds a certain awareness, like yeah, I've messed up in how I've interacted with people in a disagreement or whatever, but having that experience breeds a certain awareness, as opposed to like having awareness of like, should I comment this, should I post this, kind of thing, where you're completely in control of like how you react.
Mhm.
And sometimes in real life conversations, you got to work on how you react. And so I'm just very curious to see how that's going to be moving forward. I'm not. It's not that I'm feeling, I guess, negative about it, but I hope it. I think everything works in a cycle. I hope it cycles back around to where like people are going to desire for that face to face interaction, and I think that awareness is kind of going away. One thing to turn kind of like the positive side of my mental health issues, um, my anxiety. For instance, this last anxiety episode I went through, talking about awareness here. Um, when I got out of it, and you have that relieving moment, you take that deep breath, and you're like, my chest isn't tight anymore. I don't have to go sit in a room by myself
Mhm.
anymore. I can now. I have this awareness of like what really makes me feel good, and like that awareness of you know general awareness about life. And one thing that I'm thankful of that my mentors have taught me has been general awareness that breeds into playing or into networking or whatever
Mhm.
conversations like I'm doing now. Um, so it's all about perspective, I think, when it comes to this kind of like awareness thing of like taking these relationships like we're talking about, and who knows what they'll breed into, but how I just wish it didn't feel so down, like it didn't feel so negative going forward about like how we're going to interact with this. The amount of people that I know that I've seen that are friends with each other in real life that are in arguments, especially over the past year and a half, are
Mhm.
in arguments on social media in front of everybody. It's sad. It's
Yeah, well, that's why I don't. I mean, I fall prey to it sometimes, but I
mm,
generally like I don't. If people want to fight with me on a thread, I invite them on the podcast, and that usually shuts the comment thread down
exactly.
because most folks don't want to. The problem with social media is it's passive. Like
Hmm.
you can say stuff, you don't have to own it. You don't even really your face isn't on it. You could be taking a crap and say something horrible about somebody, and it like nobody's gonna know. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And I would say that I agree with you in general. Like there are ways though that I think humans are going to have to you have to be actively engaged in disengaging from social media. So like sometimes when So goes on the road, if we go out to dinner, it doesn't happen as often as I think we'd like because nobody wants to be that guy. But like if you just put all your phones in the middle of the table, first person to check their phone buys a round.
Mm.
Like in my steel band class at NYU and at Princeton, no cell phones. If I see you with a cell phone, I'm taking it, and you get it back at the end of class. And it feels like so like third grade, but
Yeah. But you
like
have to.
I'm
I
not.
mean,
No, you're not allowed to read your music off your phone.
mm.
Like that sort of stuff. Like for me, it's a little bit of I need you to show buy-in to what's happening here. Gotta have a little
Yeah.
skin in the game for this particular class or this conversation. And it's one of my favorite things about doing podcasts. It's like, and playing concerts. They're the two times in my life where I don't have this on, like, and I'm not actively checking it. They happen to be the two times in my life when I have the least anxiety,
I
and
mean,
so it's not rocket science.
exactly the same for me. And I think I'm like 55 episodes in, 60 maybe, and I go back and listen to the ones from when I literally was just doing it for fun, like like literally just like, hey, you're my friend, let's do a podcast, not that it still has an element to that. It's not like I'm you know have like this agenda or anything, but I go back and listen to those, and it's just so like it feels like a completely different era. I don't know if you go back and listen to your early episodes, but it's just like you're trying to like learn how to guide a conversation. You're learning how to, which is a skill that I did not anticipate that I needed to develop. I'm sure you feel the same way,
Oh
but
yeah.
I mean,
But it's just like
is
anything else. I mean, I'm 200, and I think if you like my podcast, this is like the 213th Constant Honesty podcast. I did like 6 with Yuko for this other podcast, Pan and Tune, and then for the Reich Drumming at 50 website that So did with Russ Hartenberger at Nexus, I did 52 chats for that. And I'm really like the Reich thing was like, yeah, I'm talking to Steve, but I'm talking to Judy Sherman and Joan Labar, like people who premiered drumming, and like these are people who are heavies in the field, and I am really grateful that I did 200 podcasts prior to that,
oh
because
yeah,
it's having a conversation is a skill set. The art of conversation. I'm not claiming to be a black belt at it, but if you go back and listen to the early the reason Adam Solinsky is the first podcast is because I picked someone I knew who could talk for 2 hours, and I never had to say a thing.
yeah,
And I was like, and it's not, and I'm being glib here because it's Adam and I love him to death, but like, it was a great conversation, but I was thoughtful about who that first person was because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't want there to be dead space. And then the second podcast was somebody I knew well, and it was like, okay. And I think like, I don't know who the first person was, maybe Joan Tower or somebody that I just didn't know at all. And it was terrifying, but I got better at it. I mean, I
yeah,
yes, I could go back to the third podcast. The one with Steve Reich was like my 30th,
yeah.
and I looked last night, and it's like it's had 1,200 downloads. It's the most listened podcast that I've done, and I wasn't good at them. I'm
Yeah.
horrified to look at what I talked with Steve about in his living room that day, but I'm better at it now. I'm better talking to you than I was talking to Steve, and that is just a product of the process. Like, you cannot learn how to talk with people long form consistently without a shitload of dead air until
Oh
you do
my
it.
god. Oh my
Until you
god.
do it. And
Yeah.
you have to learn not even just learning how to talk, but learning how to listen. Learning how to put your agenda aside if the person you're talking to says something far more interesting than what you wanted to talk about, and then how to bring the conversation hopefully back to a smooth landing, like Elon Musk's space rocket, like
Falcon 9, baby.
so it doesn't blow up on it, whenever you
Yeah.
wrap it up. And you know, some days are better than others, but this is the problem I have a little bit with the anxiety that people have. They're like, I'm never going to do it, and that's proof that the blah blah blah. There's this is keeping me out. It's like, maybe, but I think you're underestimating. Like, I think sometimes your anxiety is perceiving a problem that you actually have control over,
Yeah.
and maybe the way to solve that problem is to go have coffee with a composer friend of yours, and just start that fuse burning. You never know when that bomb's going to go off, but just light as many fuses as you can. I think that's my point, and
Yeah.
just and trust that enough of them will go off if you are diligent about it.
I me and some buddies are doing a little percussion group project, and just to get some pieces out there, and just ultimately we just want to play. So that's like why we're doing it. Um, some of them are thinking really far ahead. We need to commissions and stuff like that. I was like, actually, why don't we provide an example for pieces that haven't been recorded yet. Or like, it doesn't matter how hard they are. Like, let's make a good product for people to reference, for them, for their sixth graders or their ninth graders or their 12th graders to play, and like, provide that kind of that product for them, and it's good practice for video editing, which is daunting in itself. But, but it's, it's lighting that fuse like you're talking about. Like, this could blow up. It could be a dud. It could be, it could take, it could be a long fuse, so
it could blow up my other projects.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. And
yeah,
I kind of felt that recently with, even when all these times where I'm like, man, this podcast, it's not pulling the numbers I want it to pull and everything like that. But there's just something that always kind of pulls me back to a sense of, I got to keep doing it. I don't know why. I got to figure out a way to keep doing it. I hate, I wish you and I were face to face right now, because I think it's and this is a completely different conversation when it is like that. But got to keep doing it. I don't know. There's got to find a way. I'm got to ask people who, I got to keep asking people. Got to keep doing the thing where like maybe I get ghosted, maybe I don't, maybe they say no. Who cares? Got to figure something else out. And I think that's all kind of breeds back into what we're talking about. And I think it does help me mentally, because people are so interesting, man. That's what I've come to realize about this. Like, talking with Casey Cangelosi on I just messaged him, Same with Gene Kaczynski. I was just like, you and Tim want to come on, kind of thing. And you figure it out from there. And it's just,
people love talking about themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's there's a bottomless pit of people to talk to. And if you can ask the right questions. Do you listen to Terry Gross at all? Mm-mm. She's an NPR interviewer, conversationalist. But she's like the best way to start any conversation is to say, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've sort of like changed that. Like, my own version of that is, can you tell me about Baby Josh? Like, what got Baby Josh into? And usually, like, somebody's like, oh yeah, cool. And like, they think they're going to tell me something about how, like, baby Erin, saw a guitar when she was 3 and her whole life. And it's like, no, normally what happens is, like, the most interesting thing about a person is usually something that happened when they were like 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, my dad was an astrophysicist and he played harmonica. And then, and then I went to grad school and I'm like, beep. Your dad was an astrophysicist and he played the harmonica. Can we talk about that for 2 seconds? And it's like that little phrase that's how I started every Reich podcast for the Drumming at 50. If you've watched any of them, I usually, like, my first question is, can you just tell me about baby Steve Reich? Like, what got baby Steve into music,
Yeah.
And so, but again, it's like, that's something I've learned, and you have to, and I would say there's currency in emotional peace. Like, that's a paycheck. I mean, if not getting a paycheck brings you anxiety because you can't pay your rent, and doing a podcast alleviates your anxiety, but you still have to pay your rent, then your anxiety's gone.
Yeah.
That should make paying your rent a step easier, you know? And so, like, then go mow lawns, deliver papers, do whatever you got to do, but, like, do it if your anxiety is the thing that's actually in your way. And Larry Snyder, when I mentioned him earlier, just to bring it back to him, he talked a lot about performance anxiety through my undergrad. And performance anxiety, your performance is potential minus interferences equals performance. And so your potential is, like, you on your best day when the practice room's shut and no one's in the building and you fucking nail it and you're like, damn, no one was around, And then you go and you walk on a concert stage, you walk out and you're playing Mirage and the first note you hit is an A natural instead of a B natural. And then all of a sudden you're in your head for the next 30 seconds and you don't remember what you just played. That was my graduate recital at Yale, right in front of Bob Van Cise. So, like, but it's true. Like, if you can figure out what the interferences are, maybe some of them you can't get rid of. Maybe you can't get rid of the baby crying. But if the lighting in the room is an interference for you, then ask them to turn the lights off. Like, get that shit out of your way if you can.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny about the grad recital thing. Just whoops. But
I have a million of those.
Say what?
I said I have a million of those.
Oh, dude, I'm sure, because, like, well, my grad recital got canceled because of the world was on fire. But um, I would have played Chameleon by Samut, and I was really stoked to play it. I've always wanted to play it, and I felt like I was finally good enough to play it. And we're on our way to pick up a guest artist from Australia. Um, 2 weeks to the day before my recital was supposed to happen, I'd already had my prelim and everything. Dean's like, "All right, yeah, you're good. All right, yeah," and like, I was like, "Okay, cool." We're on our way to pick up a guest artist just to tell him he needs to get on another plane and turn right back around, otherwise he's gonna get locked down in this country. And they're like, "Yeah, it can't happen." And I was like, "Damn!" Like, it was. I would have much rather. I probably should have done like a recording of it or something like that, just last minute. But I was just so devastated, like about it.
Well, that's one of the things about this year I lament the most for students is that the thing I push so much as a teacher is at bats. Like you just need to you need to play for people all the time, whether it be dragging people in your practice room and be like, I'm going to give a concert for you right now.
Yeah.
And then whatever. That sort of thing was nearly impossible this year.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like for me, that's the way I can disarm students' performance anxiety. I can't really disarm any sort of trauma-induced anxiety from a childhood thing or a death or whatever. But like if playing is what scares you, I can fix that. You just got to play, and you'll be less scared of the consequences of missing a note or getting a bad review. I mean, you can find plenty of bad reviews of So Percussion that broke my heart for a week, but Papa got to eat, so I went back to work.
Papa got to eat,
and I can only take that criticism so much before it just stops me from what I'm doing, and I just couldn't. It wasn't an option. So yeah, just at bats, like something you're bad at, if you want to be better at running, you gotta run. Like there's no pill you can take. You can't watch a YouTube video and be good at brain surgery. You gotta cut open a head.
Yeah,
blood shoot everywhere and be like, oops.
Which in our case is most of the time a marimba piece. So,
Yeah, me too. Like there's a reason I don't play marimba solos for a living, Josh. It's manyfold, but there's one, I'm not good at it. And
there's only like 5 people who do it anyway. So, I mean, in which that's a whole other discussion I guess we could have about how prominent it is, but in developing, but I'm just speaking of bats. I had to check real quick. The Houston Astros beat your Cleveland Indians last night.
It's okay.
Does it contribute to your anxiety just based on? Okay, all right.
No, not at all. I'm repping Ohio. The C is for Cleveland. All things God. Cleveland. All things Cleveland. I'll be with the Indians or the Spiders, if whatever they change the name to, and then the Browns and the Cavs.
Are they thinking about the Spiders for real? Mm-hmm. Wow.
I don't know there was a couple names on the table, but
I forgot they were doing it. Well, I guess they should do an Indian.
Yeah, it brings me zero anxiety at all, to be honest. I grew up going to Cleveland Indians games with my dad when nobody was there, and so I have a soft spot in my heart for Cleveland.
Yeah, man. I mean, I went through some dark times with the Astros, from getting swept in the 2005 World Series by the Chicago White Sox to...
Yeah, but didn't you guys cheat?
No. Well, yes, but everybody
cheats.
Okay,
all right, great. Okay, so, I mean, the Indians, I'll give this for the Indians. They don't cheat. They're just consistently bad.
Hey, man, didn't y'all go to a World Series recently? It was the Cubs World Series, right?
1995, I think.
No, I think they were in 2016 World Series, right?
The Indians?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you're right. This shows how much of a fan I am.
I don't think a lot of people know that. I guess they consistently use that logo now, the C, because it used to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the Chief Wahoo. I mean, as a kid, I had the Chief Wahoo stuff, and I think I understand why folks are wanting to change the logo, and I think I've always just stuck with the C because it's pretty timeless, and I think I'm okay. Like, you're not going to get in any trouble wearing a C hat, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, sorry, back to anxiety.
Sorry.
I got us distracted there.
I'm a sports fan, so I just, general, I do reference a lot of what I do with sports just based on drawing inspiration and everything, but there seems to be a little bit of a push in from professional athletes too, who deal with this stuff. I mean, obviously they're in a very high pressure situation, and it's just different, I think. But when it boils down to like everybody's individual journey, I just want to make sure that I provide conversations that people share their story, and make it known, like the disclaimer, we let it be known that we are not saying this is the right way or the wrong way. It's just, I mean, I've had 2 people say they're on Lexapro now, and I've had people say they didn't even try pharmaceuticals. I've had people say talk therapy, to even think like there hasn't been anything like in my research, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of organizations for musician specific. I think there's a few, but they're mostly regional. I think there's one in Atlanta and stuff like that. I personally don't know anything has enough reach to have resources for mental health treatment, or at least provide like information on how to go about it. A lot of people don't have health insurance, which is
Right.
something, another discussion. But
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm hesitant to say that folks should or should not seek a specific type of treatment, like
right,
just because everybody's different, and in full disclosure, I don't want to be on Lexapro. Like, it doesn't make me feel bad when I take it, but I did a couple years ago, 2016, after the summer of 2016, prior to the elections, the Trump election, I went off of Lexapro with guidance from my doctor. And so it was like a 6-month thing. And as I was going off of it, that's when Harvey Weinstein blew up. The Me Too movement happened. It's still happening, and for all the right reasons. I totally get it. But that was like another social media moment where it was like everything was happening online, and I had anxiety in a similar fashion to the George Floyd moment this past summer. It was just like I felt helpless. And coupled with going off my Lexapro, I realized like, oh wow, I think I'm addicted to Lexapro. Like going off of it was awful. Like it was the only time when I felt like I genuinely couldn't function. Like I was curled up in a ball, just like frozen. And I called my doctor and I was like, I got to go back on it. I just can't. And so I went back on it, and it is what it is. But if I had to choose, I would love to not be on it. That would be my choice if I wanted to. But I'm choosing to take it because of many reasons. One, I feel better, and that's my truth, and it works for me. There was a podcast, we did a TED Talk years ago about other stuff, but one of the speakers was this guy Andrew Solomon. And when you're talking about resources, I highly recommend anybody who deals with depression or anxiety to look him up. He's on the TEDx circuit a bunch. He's an author, lecturer, but he suffers from severe manic depression, and he talks a lot about going to medical conferences and talking to like dentists, and how like dentists are talking about the new fluoride toothpaste, and here's the new thing to clean your teeth, and blah blah blah, and how that technology is updating every year, and there's a new thing, like blah blah blah. But when we talk about mental health, we don't look at Lexapro as like toothpaste. Like we are getting better versions of mental toothpaste to help sort of recoat the ski slopes of your brain, so you're not going down the same destructive grooves every day. Your teeth aren't naturally going to stay the way they are if you don't take care of them, right?
Right.
Like that's what happens. They decay. So you put artificial stuff in your face to keep your teeth there, because if your teeth decay, then the gums decay, and then you get cancer, and there's a bunch of other things that can come, right? Well, Andrew Solomon talks about medication for him is akin to brushing his teeth, and he's like, the dentist just looked at me like I was crazy. Like there's some stigma we have with the brain, because the brain is who we are. Your teeth are not who we are. I could lose all my teeth and I'm still Josh Quillen. I just can't eat corn on the cob,
Right. And you can also get replacements, like
Right.
like you can't get a replacement of the old noggin. Like it's
And
I
this is the
wish.
part, and this is why depression is so destructive, because it makes you doubt who you are. And then when you bring that into a room with people and you force other people in the room to deal with your depression or your mental health issues or whatever, it forces other people in the room to deal with someone that you're not. Do you know what I mean?
Same, 100%. Because I was going to
And
say it's the same with like a romantic relationship or whatever. That person, it's exhausting for that person,
right.
especially if they don't deal with that.
And
And
so that's, even if they do deal with it, it can compound it and make it even harder because they're dealing with their own stuff. Like,
mhm.
so that's the thing. Like when I when I said the thing earlier about being a teacher and how like my ethics are frustrated here, when a student is just like, I'm feeling stressed, I need a break, I need a mental health break. There's a part of me that's like, give me a hug, I'm with you, got it.
Yeah,
You leaving the room causes me crushing anxiety, and that's important, right?
yeah,
Like, I actually think you don't want to be here. I think you're not getting anything out of it. I feel like I'm wasting my time. I feel like I said something that is going to get me fired. Like, if I don't know the context behind why you just walked out of the room. And that's the thing. Like, you're, as a student, you're forcing everybody else in the room to deal with your problem. And not to say that that can never be a place for that to happen, but that's a currency exchange.
mm,
And for me, as someone who deals with depression and anxiety, I know how it feels when somebody puts that on me. And so when I walk into a sober rehearsal, or I walk into Carnegie Hall, or I walk into the Stone, which is a tiny little concert venue that holds like 10 people and you play for the door. I walk into every one of those all the time with some version of a crushing, debilitating mental yoke I've put on myself.
man, I can resonate with that
But
so much.
but it is my responsibility. Personally, I feel it's my responsibility to try to take as much of that yoke off and put it outside on the curb so that when I enter the room, everybody else can be who they are. And that makes it easier for me to be who I am, which
Mm,
sometimes is sad. Then I can communicate to the room. I can tell my bandmates now, guys, we're playing the show today. I'm in a bad place. Just be there for me. Jason, I'm gonna need your cues to be a little bigger today
yeah,
because I'm just fighting the fight. And they'll all look at me and be like, "Gotcha." But that's come from 16 years of trying to take my yoke off and learning what it means to bring my yoke in and ruin a day.
yeah.
You know,
Because it definitely takes a little bit of trial and error to learn how to take that yoke off. Because
totally, totally.
sometimes it's like freaking cement. Like it's hard.
Hmm.
It's actually harder than playing drums
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, exponentially. Playing
Uh,
concerts is the easiest thing in the world
yeah,
that I do. Of all the things I do, playing a show is the only time I don't stress.
because the way I think about it is the amount of hours I put in working on my craft versus working on my mental health is like not even in the same universe.
No, but again, I think that it's this, like, the fundamental struggle of who you are. We oftentimes look at our practice as like, I'm practicing standard role so I can become an orchestra musician. I can get this job, and if I get this job, if I beat out Cynthia Ye at the Chicago Symphony, I've made it, and that's who I am. It's like, well, I don't know, maybe,
Mm,
but
yeah,
like, is Nancy Zeltzman a marimbist? Partially. Is she a teacher? Partially. Is she a composer? Partially. like
yeah.
and I think if you ask Nancy, like, who are you, I doubt the first words out of her mouth would be marimba soloist. Like, I bet it would be some complicated, like, oh, I'm this person, I love dogs and I love gardening and I love blah blah blah. Michael Burrett, I don't know what he would say first thing out of his mouth. I don't know, I probably run, I like to run, like. And I think for me, I'm trying to be very careful that, like, I'm not a member of So Percussion. Like, I am in So Percussion, but I am not, like, when at my funeral, if what people say is, man, he was a great member of So Percussion, I've really dropped the ball somewhere. And I truly believe that, or at least I want to believe that that's what I want
Mm.
in life.
Yeah, and but I always reference Dean Gronemeyer because he's for one thing, he's one of the most interesting people I've ever met.
Mm.
Um, He was this prominent, primarily marimba player in the 1990s, and Nature Alley, that album was full of all these compositions that people still play today. And um, one day he's like, I'm going to be a criminal defense lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's a criminal defense lawyer and has been for the last 20 years in Las Vegas, which is nothing short of interesting, trust me. But
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting you put it that way. Like, if I went up to Gordon Stout, what would Gordon Stout say? Like what actually, like, what would Van Cise say?
Well,
It's
here's
so
for just Gordon's a good example. Like, and to be clear, I don't know Gordon personally. I met him once, and we've chatted on Facebook, and
right.
totally big fan, lovely person.
Yes.
I think if I were the thing I've learned about Gordon that I had the assumption going through school was that Gordon was this like marimba pony who just did nothing but churn out marimba etudes and like was just like he had a barn out back and he was running on a treadmill just playing etudes all day. Like that was that was my head as a student. I was like, well, he's in the Steve White's catalog. That must be what he's doing,
Yeah.
But Gordon's incredibly politically active and vocal about it, more so than Nancy Zeltzman is. And that's not to say Nancy's not politically active, but I've learned like Gordon actually may be more of an advocate for, like, in terms of what he is okay with the world seeing him as. Facebook and social media has allowed me to be like, oh, wow, Gordon's a complicated guy.
Yeah.
He's not just a marimba pony, you know?
Right.
And it's like, of course that's true. I mean, Bob is the same way. Bob has interests outside of, Bob is an amazing timpani player. Also loves chicken fried steak. And because he's from Houston, I think.
Is he really?
His dad played French horn, I believe, in the Houston Symphony, and Bob played timpani with the Canton Symphony. Bob is actually a better timpani player than a marimba player, I would say, and I'll bet he would take that as a compliment.
Wow. I had no idea.
Bob teaches, I would say he's the best at teaching, of all the things he teaches, he's the best at teaching chamber music. So anyway, just to say, like, yes, of course, people are more than just the sort of first thing you see on social media or whatever. And I think as a student, the quicker you can, Michael Spyro imparted this on me a lot whenever he would come through the university of Akron. He's like, have a science project. The people who are doing the interesting things in life over the long haul always have something growing mold in the fridge. Like, what is the thing that you piece together and it's like, that's not working. I'll come back to it. Like, oh, this thing. And for Spyro, it was adapting like Yoruba singing from like African drumming. And I'm like, these are broad brushes. I clearly don't know anything about it, but like doing weird hybrid versions of like large bata drumming ensembles, but as a soloist. And then both your feet are involved, and then you're singing. It's like he had this weird thing that no one else was doing, and he then sort of built this thing around him, and he's working with all these amazing musicians because he's the guy that has the interesting thing. He's not just the guy that can play a tumbao. And Tom Miller, same deal with him, and people in the steel drum world, and we're working with this guy Shodake Talaferro, who's a beatboxer. He's not just a beatboxer. He does something new with, he calls it breath art. And it's like when you hear it, you're like, yeah, I could imagine you being on a stage at Coachella, but also like, I could totally imagine you playing with John Cage. That's very strange, and so like, that's his weird thing growing in the fridge. And I think for students, I think if you don't have that, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to have, let me take that back. Having a science project will get you more relationships and friends and gigs and long-term sort of marketability than not having one and just focusing on the method books that you are told to buy and those hoops. If you are an orchestral musician but you love like making electronic music with vegetables, do it. Fucking do it. Practice Kiji, but also at night when no one's looking, plug your electrodes into Ableton and start touching eggplants and make awesome stuff. Because when you go to audition for an orchestra, hopefully in 40 years, they'd be like, and next on the required list we'd like excerpt number 3 from Angelica Negron's vegetable piece, like, and then the percussion, like by that point, hopefully it's become part of the canon in the way
Yeah.
that Lansky's Threads did. Hopefully that, and then orchestras are like, it's not crazy now for us to be like, you have to play a Bach solo, a Bach cello suite or something on a marimba or on an orchestra audition.
A Delacluse or,
Right. But in the 1950s,
oh, how dare you? Yeah.
well, in the 1950s, it was like, hey, we need a snare drummer for the Philly Orchestra. Do you got anybody?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, Alan Abel's my student, let him do it. And
Ever
but
heard
now,
of him?
but now things have progressed to that point. So it would make sense to me that it would get to that. And so having those science projects will make you more interesting. It will also teach you in terms of process how to be interested in something. And
truly interested instead of just like going through the motions of
right.
requirements and checking boxes and
right. So again, sorry, just I have about 10 more minutes here before I got to wrap. But
same.
I really hope anybody who's dealing with anxiety or a student who just feels like it's something for them that is they don't know how to get past, feel free to reach out to me. If I've said something today that you feel is super counter to what you believe, talk to me, because I'll probably learn from you. Or I may learn that I'm right. And you may learn that it wasn't terrible advice, or vice versa, whatever. Like, just reach out and not think like Russ Hartenberger. He's just a 75-year-old version of me. And Steve Reich, like, yes, he's who he is, but he's an 85-year-old version of you. Like, he's been through, like, we're all trying to figure this out. And I think, and to say that Steve and Russ don't have anxiety, to say that Caroline Shaw doesn't have anxiety, you're batshit crazy. Yeah. We all are trying to work through it. So if what's stopping you from reaching out and trying to get advice and not feel alone is that you feel like we're unreachable or that we're not dealing with it, just let me tell you you're wrong, and you need to get past that as quick as you can.
Yeah, 100%. I can't thank you enough for your time, man. I appreciate everything you've said and having this great conversation. It's fun podcasting with another podcaster, and it's also under these circumstances and what this conversation was about was something that like I said, I just hope people find something out of it, and I think they will, especially with your insight and your experiences. And yeah, man, just thank you so much for your time.
You're quite welcome. I had a therapist, I'll just end with this. I had a therapist that told me once that, like, one important thing to learn about your anxiety and your fears of something is that your initial feelings aren't necessarily proof of anything. They're not proof that you're in danger. They're not proof that you're right about this thing is then going to hypothetically happen if I don't do this other thing. Like, so trying to see things as rationally and objectively as you possibly can. Like, if you're about to walk on stage and you feel like you're going to die, try your best to just be like, let me call balls and strikes here. That's a stage. That's my grandma in the audience. That's a light. That's a stagehand. There's no bears here. There's no Komodo dragons. There's no snakes. Like, yeah, I mean, it sounds silly, but like, genuinely walk yourself through. Martha Argerich, the piano player, has crushing stage anxiety.
Yeah.
And there's great video of her walking around backstage just pacing, and then she just walks out and it's just like, and just like machine guns the whole audience with the piano, like, but
people would have no idea.
No. And so I think, like, just try to see your anxiety not necessarily as proof of anything initially, and do the work to see if it actually is proof of something. And I think you'll find it will yield some good results for you. But on that note, buddy, I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful that you took the initiative to do it. And I hope that you find enjoyment out of having these conversations. And I hope other folks find at least a little solace from them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been finding a lot of enjoyment in these, and like with every podcast, whether it's within this series or not, there's something to be learned out of every one of them, especially on my end. And I've learned a lot over this past week and a half or so, and I will say this: this battle between self one, self two, kind of thing. Almost, Dean talks about it a lot, um, and also saying maybe sometimes these thoughts are not my own. It's it's very it's powerful. What I've learned in what you can say to yourself and to your brain, just by just by doing that. Um, and look, nobody has to go as extreme as I did when it comes to recording these conversations. But finding somebody and just asking somebody what they deal with, you would be surprised. I got very good at masking what I was dealing with, and all the way through a 6 to 8 week anxiety episode, nobody had any idea until recently, until I told them, the people that I was around during that time. So don't be afraid to just ask. I think that's the main thing I can say, and don't be afraid to say what you need to say out loud, calling balls and strikes, right? And saying to yourself audibly, this is something that I don't have to worry about at all. And so,
well, your brain, this is the other thing too, like your brain's just trying to keep you alive.
yeah,
It's an evolutionary ball of meat, and its only job is to keep you breathing. And so it's just working for you. And so give yourself a break sometimes. Cut it some slack. And it's just there to keep you alive. And so it makes mistakes and it misreads things. And so anyway, your advice is great, and I thank you for your time. This has been really fun, and I will do my best to get these files edited and sent over to you. And then when we release it, let me know how, like, if there's a specific way you want things credited or whatever. Just let me know so folks can find it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah. This will be released on both of ours, Concert Honesty and the Rudimental podcast. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it, and you can find the Rudimental podcast on all major streaming platforms. It's the same for Concert Honesty, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. And go to joshquillen.com and everything's there as well.
joshquillen.com, hartwelldrums.com for me. I'm doing video, so on the YouTube channel, it's my personal YouTube channel right now. The support link for mine for anchor.fm is in the description below. I'll have links to everybody's social media accounts and everything like that. So, and Concert Honesty and everything. So, yeah, that's a wrap on this one. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on, in so percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.